We are in the part one of our brand new series called Watch Your Mouth, and I'm excited for this series. It should be a lot of fun. Watch Your Mouth. Our mouth is very powerful. Like, we know that already, right? Like, our mouth, there's a lot of things that can happen because of our mouth. I mean, we can build relationships. We can, not only just romantically, but socially, we can have some great relations because of what our mouth does. We can help our kids to have like so much confidence when they grow up because of what our mouth says. We can help organizations be great organizations because of our mouth. But our mouth can also do a lot of damage too, right? Like, you can destroy your relationships with just a couple things that your mouth says. Like, quickly you can destroy your relationship, even quicker than you can build it up. Your kids, you can make sure that they have a lifetime of anxiety and insecurity because of how you talk to them. We can do that. And then organizations, I mean, come on, we can destroy organizations with just our mouth, with word of mouth, with what we say. There's a lot of things we can do with our mouth. And the Bible talks about our mouth a lot. In fact, in James chapter 3, it says this: the tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches, but a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. It's a small thing, but man, it can cause so much good or bad. It is so powerful. And because our words are so powerful, and because our words and what we say with our mouth can cause so much damage, because our words there's so many things that can come out of our mouth, because of that, we need to be careful what we say. We need to watch our mouth. We need to be careful in how we say things and what we say on some of the things that we say. So throughout this series, just a 3-week series, we're going to be talking about some of the things that our mouth does. We're going to be talking about gossip, and we're going to be talking about criticizing, and today, we're going to be talking about complaining. Now, getting ready for this sermon, I wanted to think of some complaints that I've heard, and I'm a dad. I have 3 kids, 2 that talk, and 1 that screams when he doesn't get what he wants at this point. But so the 2 that talk was like, you know what I'm going to do? For a week, I am just going to listen to all of their complaints, and I'm going to write them down. So I wrote their complaints down, and I just wanted to read to you the list of complaints that I started writing at the beginning of this week for my 2 kids, Brooklyn, who's 5, and Savannah, who's 3. Ready? I'm not hungry. I don't want that. She touched me. She won't give it to me. She took my Barbie. It's taking too long. I don't want to take a bath. I don't want to go to potty. I don't want to go to bed. Why do I have to clean up? But it's too much to clean up. Why is it too much to clean up? Because they got all the toys out. Anyways, I don't want to drink my milk. I'm hungry. I'm tired. I'm not tired. I don't want to watch that. I don't want to listen to that. I want to go outside. I don't want to go outside. I want my scooter. I want to get up. I don't want to get up. How much longer? This tastes weird. This looks weird. I don't want these shoes. I want to wear a dress. I don't want to play with her. I don't want to sit with you. I want mommy. I want daddy. It's a lot of mess. I'm cold. I'm freezing. I'm hot. My legs are tired. And after one day, I stopped taking the notes. Seriously, this was one day. And I was like, you know what? I'm done. I don't have enough paper for how much notes I'm going to be taking. It was ridiculous. My kids love to complain, and all of us hate complaining. All of us do. In fact, if you think of like some of your like favorite movies and you think of an annoying character in a movie, most likely that character is annoying to you because they complain too much. Think about it. We hate complaining. When there's someone around us that complains too much, we hate it. None of us like it. But all of us do it, which is weird, right? We all hate it, but all of us do it. We all hate complaining, but all of us complain. And it's not good for us. In fact, science says that it's not good for us. I watched a YouTube video on this about your brain, and your brain is fascinating because our brain wants to run efficiently. That's its goal, is to run as efficient as possible. So if you repeat a memory too many times, then it will create pathways between whatever's in your brain so that way you think of that thought quicker. So if you think of happy thoughts a lot, you will think of happy thoughts quicker. And on the other side, if you think of negative thoughts too much, then you will think of them quicker because your brain is trying to be as efficient as possible. So if you complain too much, your brain is going to say, oh, they like to complain. We're going to make sure that they think about complaining all the time. And then you start to complain more because your brain is trying to be efficient. It's crazy. And then if we complain too much, here's what happens. There's certain things in our brain. There's the hippocampus, which is our problem-solving part of our brain. That will shrink if you complain too much. That will shrink. And when that shrinks, you will release a stress called cortisol. And when that is released, and you have that more cortisol because you complained and your hippocampus went down, then you will have a higher chance of diabetes, you'll have a higher chance of obesity, and a higher chance of cardiovascular disease because your blood pressure will go up and your blood sugar will go up. All from complaining. If we complain too much, literally it's bad for our health. See, life is hard. So a lot of times we have things to complain about, but if you really think about it, life is hard, sure, but life doesn't technically owe us anything, right? Like, what does life really owe us? Like, there's things that we might want to accomplish, but when we complain too much, we accomplish it. Because you can't accomplish things and complain at the same time. If you complain, you're not going to accomplish anything. So what do we do with our complaints? What do we do with complaining? And here's what I'm starting to learn, and here's what I want to help you guys learn today is this. You can change your perspective even when you can't change your circumstance. You can change your perspective even when you cannot change your circumstance. When something is happening that makes you want to complain, when something in your life is hard, when something happens like that, whatever that is, you can change the way you look at that situation even when you can't change that situation. You have a choice on how you look at it, your perspective. You can change your perspective even when you can't change your circumstances. So we all have things to complain about, right? We complain about being single, if you're single. I just desperately want to be married to somebody, so we complain about it. And then when we get married, what do we complain about? Complain about our spouse. They just don't do this. They always do this. We complain about our spouse. We have kids. We complain about our kids, right? It's like, they just always do this. We complain about our jobs, right? We complain about all those things. We complain about our favorite TV show that didn't end the way you wanted, and the person you wanted on the Iron Throne did not end up on the Iron Throne. Some of you feel guilty, right? So we complain about a lot of stuff. But here's what I've learned. The problem isn't the complaint. The problem isn't your spouse. The problem isn't your kids. The problem isn't your job or your lack of money. The things you're complaining about, that's not the problem. That's not the problem. The problem is we've taken our eyes off of God and made ourselves the center. That's the problem. And because of that, our perspective has changed. But we can choose how we look at our circumstances. You can change your perspective even when you can't change your circumstances. So in the Bible, the best example of complaining are the Israelites in Exodus. If you have your Bibles, you can go up to Exodus chapter 14 is where we're going to start. In Exodus, here were the Israelites, were God's chosen people. They were slaves to Egypt and to Pharaoh, and they're there in slavery, and God, through a burning bush, speaks to Moses. Most of you know this story, right? He speaks to Moses and sends Moses, and Moses ends up asking Pharaoh to let his people go. And Pharaoh says no, so they do 10 different plagues until Pharaoh finally says, you know what? Take them. Take the Israelites. I don't want them anymore. And the Israelites are walking. They're free from slavery because God did all these miracles to get them to be free. They're at this big Red Sea, and they turn around, and Pharaoh changed his mind. At first, he was like, hey, you can go. And now he's like, no, I want them back. So they're coming for him. And the Israelites are standing there in front of this big Red Sea, and they turn around. They see the Egyptians coming after them. And here's how they respond to that. Exodus chapter 14, we're going to start in verse 11. Just listen to how the Israelites respond to this. Here's the Israelites talking to Moses. Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you have brought us to the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we say to you in Egypt, leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert. So literally like, what are you doing? You're trying to free us, now we're going to die. We wish we were back there as slaves. That's what we wish we were doing. They saw all this stuff that was happening. They saw the circumstances they were in front of. And remember what just happened with them. They saw God do 10 different miracles. They saw frogs rain from the sky. They saw fire and hail come from the sky. They saw God take the dust and turn it into lice, all to free them. And now they're standing in front of this big sea where they feel like there's no way they can get by it, and they start complaining. Why would you take us here? We should have stayed there. Now we're going to die here. Why would you do that? Why are they complaining? Because they're looking at their current circumstance with the wrong perspective. The wrong perspective. Verse 13, Moses answered the people, do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. So what comes next? You probably know what comes next. They're standing in front of the Red Sea. Moses lifts up his staff, and the sea parts. And the Israelites walked through this part that was a sea. They walk on dry land all the way to the other side. They get to the other side, the sea comes back. Every Egyptian that's in there is gone. They are free. They don't have to worry about the Egyptians anymore. You can just imagine like the celebration, right? You can just imagine on that side, they're throwing a party like, we're finally free. We're finally free. So recap, they saw all these things, all these miracles that God did to free them, and then they saw a sea split in half so they could walk through, all to free them. So no matter what comes next, you would think, you can't complain anymore, right? Like you saw a sea part. Because God wanted to free you and loved you so much, he split a sea for you. No matter what comes next, even if it's hard coming next, they can't complain again, right? Surely they can't continue to complain. Let's move to Exodus 16. 2 chapters, starting in verse 2. Here's the Israelites again. In the desert, the whole community grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The Israelites said to them, if only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted. But you have brought us into the desert to starve this entire assembly to death. So now they are literally like, can we go back again? I know God parted the Red Sea for us, but we're really hungry and we're in the desert. Can we go back? They are still complaining. Still complaining. And this isn't the last time either. In fact, I got a list. We're going to put the list up on the screen of all the times the Israelites complained. Let me read to you. They complained about the water being too bitter in Exodus 15. They complained that they were really thirsty. They complained about the food, so much so that the Bible says Moses wanted to die. Moses was like, God, can you just kill me? Because I do not want to deal with these complaining Israelites anymore. That's how much they were complaining. They complained about Moses' leadership. They complained about the people in the promised land when they got to the promised land because they didn't think they could actually beat them. They complained about Moses' leadership again. Then they complained about the water again. They complained over and over and over. Israelites, they complained about their enslavement. While they were enslaved, they complained when Moses came onto the scene, and they complained when they wandered the wilderness. They complained and complained and complained. Their complaining was not rooted in their scenery. Their complaining was not rooted in their circumstances. Their complaining was rooted in their heart. It had nothing to do with their circumstances. It had to do with in their heart. And the same is true for us. Our complaining is not rooted in whatever situation we're in. Our complaining is rooted in what's inside. It's rooted in our heart. You can change your perspective even when you can't change your circumstance. You can change the way you look, which will change your heart. See, we want to have a heart of gratitude, and a heart of gratitude is not dependent on your circumstance. It's not dependent on your spouse. It's not dependent on your kids. A heart of gratitude is not dependent on your job or your bank account. A heart of gratitude is dependent on making God the center of your life. That's what it is. But both gratitude and complaining reflect our heart. That's what it reflects. So if you find ourselves complaining too much, it's a reflection of what's really inside. If we find ourselves being grateful, it's a reflection of what is inside of us. You can change your perspective even when you can't change your circumstances. So the question is, how do we change our perspective? I'm going to give you 2 ways that we change our perspective. 2 simple ways, and these are pretty practical ways that we can start to change our perspective. So if you feel like this is you, that you complain a lot, or I mean, all of us complain, right? But if you feel like you're a specific person that complains a ton, or you're just like, I wish I didn't complain as much as I did, you want to change your perspective. Here are 2 ways that we can start to change our perspective. Number 1, reminders. Number 1, reminders. My wife and I, for the past 2 years, I believe, we have a journal that we have been filling out once a week. And the journal has 6 questions that we answer every single week. See if I can remember the 6 off the top of my head. We've been doing it for 2 years, and I always have to check the front to see what the questions are. What was something that went really well this past week? What was something that was good? What was something that went really bad last week? We write down the answers to that. What is something that I need help with this week? So we write down what we need help with that week. What is something that was left unsaid this past week? So if Erica and I are in a fight and I didn't feel like I got what I wanted to get out of it, then that week I will write down what I wanted to say. Or there are times where I just don't feel like I ever told her that I loved her and I'm grateful for her, so I write that down. So what are some things that are left unsaid? What is something I can pray for you about this week to see what's going on in her mind? And what is something that we're looking forward to? Every week, my wife and I answer these questions on a journal. And once a week, I will take and I'll read my wife's answers. So that way I get to know, as a guy, for some of you guys in the room, this way I know what she's thinking because she's writing it down, right? There's times where she has trouble telling me, but I need to know it, so she tells me. And now there's times where I could feel like I can get my point across too, where there's times where I wasn't. So I've looked at this binder, and every week we write it down. For 2 years we've been writing it down. So what I started to do every once in a while is I'll go back and look at some of the past weeks from a year ago, from 2 years ago, and see what some of the things that was left unsaid, or some of the things that we were hoping for, or some of the good things that happened. And when I read those, it's a reminder to me of our relationship. So when things are really bad and we're not really connecting very well, it reminds me of all the good times we've had. It reminds me of all the work we put into it, and it helps me in the relationship today. Reminders are huge. They're crucial. When we remember how much God's grace is poured out in your life, when we remember God's love for you, we remember God's deliverance over you. When you remember God's redemption in your life, it is easier to avoid complaining the more we remember what God has done for us. The Israelites, they had to have a reminder too. So they were complaining about being hungry. And so what God did is he made manna rain from heaven. That's where we get the saying, your daily bread. Because every day they would wake up and there would be bread on the ground. And they were told, for every day, only grab what you need. Do not grab any more. Do not grab extra. Only grab what you need. And on the 6th day, grab double portion, because on the 7th day, we don't want you to grab anything. So every day they would wake up and there would literally be bread on the floor for them to eat, because God was providing for them their daily bread. But he also gave one other instruction to them in Exodus chapter 16, verse 32. It says, take an omer of manna and keep it for the generations to come, so they can see the bread I gave you to eat in the wilderness when I brought you out of Egypt. It says, take a little piece of that bread, put it in a jar. You're not going to eat this bread. This bread is just going to stay there, and you're just going to look at it. And you're going to pass it down to your kids, and your kids are going to pass it down to your kids. This is going to be a reminder for you of what I've done for you. It's going to be a reminder for you of all the times when you were a slave in Egypt and you were crying out, and I delivered you. It will remind you of that. This is going to be a reminder of when you got to that sea, the sea parted. It's going to be a reminder that when you were hungry, I gave you your daily bread. Here's a reminder for you to keep. That's what God told the Israelites to do. See, we are all inclined to complain. I am too, inclined to complain. So we need to constantly remind ourselves of what God has done for us in the past, because it makes it easier to not complain. So what are your reminders? So what I want you to do this week, and on the back of your guys' cards, your impact notes, you'll see little instructions for this. But this week, at some point, what I want you to do is write down all the times that you felt God's fingerprints in your life. All those times that you felt it, that you felt like God was there. Maybe it was a time that you gave your life to Christ. Write that down. Maybe it was a prayer that was answered, that you couldn't believe was answered. Maybe it was a season of your life where you were living a very wild life, but somehow you were protected and God protected you, even in your disobedience. Write that down. Write down those times where you have seen God show up over and over and over again. And if you think long enough, you will find those times. Write down as many of those times as possible. And when you have those written out, what I want you to do is every time you start to feel like you have something to complain about, you have those feelings where I need to complain about this, read over your list. Maybe for you, you should put it on some Post-it notes and put it on your bathroom mirror, or put it around so you see it constantly. There's times, oh yeah, I remember that day that I gave my life to Christ. I remember that time period. I remember that season. And even though right now I don't feel God, I remember that time. And those reminders will help you to avoid complaining. Think of those times that God's fingerprints was on your life. So number one, reminders. And number two, gratitude. Gratitude. Number one, reminders. Number two, gratitude. See, if complaining is a symptom of forgetting what God has done for you, then our cure is gratitude. That is our cure. That is the antidote. Being grateful for what we have. We did a series back when we were in Mount View called What Happy Couples Know. And if you weren't here for that, if you're looking for a good relationship series, I highly recommend doing that, because I didn't make it up. It was another church that made it up. We just adapted it for our setting. So I can confidently say it was a great series because I did not make it up, okay? I'm not being cocky, okay? But in that series, one thing that we learned, for those that were here, what we learned is that what happy couples know is that they don't owe each other anything. But they assume that they know each other nothing. And when you do that, you're grateful. For example, if I assume that my wife doesn't owe me anything, Like my wife does not owe me doing the dishes, or my wife doesn't owe me cleaning up, or whatever it is. Every time she does do that, I am grateful. So I'm like, man, Erica, I can't believe you did the dishes. She might say, I've done the dishes a million times. Like, yeah, I know, but you did it again today. I am so grateful for you for doing it again. You didn't have to. I am so grateful. Gratitude solves a lot of things. Marriage issues, I'm telling you, if you practice gratitude during it, it will help a lot different things. We need to be grateful. And the best example of this is Paul. Paul, he's in Philippians, he's writing from a jail cell, which he does a lot. And he's there, and he's not sure what's going to happen to him. He's not sure if he's going to be put to death. In fact, he is chained to a guard in Philippians. And he's writing this letter, and listen to how Paul responds for these terrible circumstances that he's in Philippians chapter 2, starting in verse 14. Do everything without complaining or arguing. Yeah, you mean everything? Like, no matter what, like, because there's a lot of things that go on in my life that I don't like. So but there's some things that I can justifiably complain about, Paul. I mean, there's some things that I complain, and because I was wronged, and I should be able to complain. So you mean in everything don't complain? You mean no matter what? And Paul would say, yeah, like if you're in a jail cell for your faith and you're about to be put to death, don't complain. In everything, do not complain. Verse 15. So that you may become blameless and pure, children of God without fault in a crooked and depraved generation. That's what he's saying. What better testimony of our faith than being in a situation that we could complain about and we don't? Think about it. That's a better testimony of your faith than your Bible knowledge. When you get into a situation and the rest of the world would say, man, that is a tough situation, and we don't complain about it. To go, yeah, it's not fun. Yeah, this hurts. Yeah, this sucks right now. But God still loves me, and even if it doesn't go the way I want it to, I know that I have a God who loves me like a perfect father does. That is a testimony. Verse 15. In which you shine like stars in the universe, as you hold out the word of life, in order that I may boast on the day of Christ that I do not run or labor for nothing. So he's saying, when this life ends, I know that I can stand in front of God in full confidence, in front of my Savior with full confidence that I followed and pursued Him no matter what circumstance I was in, no matter what situation life threw at me, no matter what this world threw at me, I know I could stand in confidence because I was grateful for Him. Verse 17. But even if I am poured out like a drink offering on the sacrifice and service coming from your faith, I am glad and rejoice with all of you. So you too should be glad and rejoice with me. Gives this metaphor back in the Old Testament when they would do animal sacrifices. They would take a very expensive wine or a very expensive perfume, and they would take it and they would pour it over this super, super hot sacrifice offering. They would pour a lot of it on it, which is really expensive. But it was a way for them to show that they are following God and they are sacrificing. And he says, even if I get poured out and I'm gone like that, even if I'm in this jail cell and it goes to my death, even if my circumstances turn out to be worse, I will still be glad and I will still rejoice, even if. And you might think, how can you still be glad and rejoice even with your circumstances? And the answer is gratitude. When you're grateful, when you have a heart of gratitude, even if the worst circumstances come your way, you can be grateful. You can have joy. You can rejoice. When you have a heart of gratitude, your circumstances don't matter when you have that. And think about it. If God saved us and met our biggest need, we believe as followers of Jesus, if you're here and you would say, I'm a follower of Jesus, here's what we believe. We believe that there's a God in the universe that created you and loved you so much that He sent His Son down to die for you. That even though you don't deserve it, and even though you did a lot of things wrong and I did a lot of things wrong, Jesus Christ died on a cross so that we could go and spend eternity with God. That's what we believe. That no matter how much you've done in your past, no matter how much you've sinned, that we can still spend eternity with God because it's not about us, it's about what Jesus did for us. So if that is true, our biggest need that we could never meet was met, what can we complain about really? When we really think about it, what can we complain about. You can change your perspective even when you can't change your circumstance. And you may be justified in your complaint. You may have a justifiable reason to complain, but you can look for God in the midst of your complaints. Now, I know that some of the stuff I've said sounds great, but it's really hard to do. And even when I was preparing this sermon, I was kind of wrestling with this. Like, I know that we shouldn't complain, right? Like, and we all deep down know that. And I say that, here's what we believe, so like, yeah, I get that, but I still have my complaints. And even with the reminders, and I try to put God first, I still feel like I have these complaints. What do I do with them? And that's something I was wrestling with this week, is what do we do with those complaints? David in the book of Psalms, in Psalms, if you ever read Psalms, there's a lot of praise songs in Psalms. But there's also this verse that just stuck out to me. Psalms 142, this is King David. This is David from David and Goliath, one of the best kings of Israelites. He said this, I cry aloud to the Lord. I lift up my voice to the Lord for mercy. I pour out before him my complaint. Before him, I tell my troubles. For me, there's times where I have those complaints. And then I preach this message to you, hey, we shouldn't complain, right? Like, life's great. Like, it might be hard, but God met your biggest need. Just be grateful. I'm preparing this sermon this week, and I still have like a list of complaints in my head. And while I was wrestling and preparing, I was thinking like, yeah, but what do you do with it? If we have them, do I just complain to my wife? Like, she can't handle it. And then I read what King David read, what King David wrote. I pour out my complaints to him. What does David do? Those complaints that he has, he goes to God with him. Two reasons why you do that. One, God already knows your complaints. We're not hiding it from him, right? He already knows what we're feeling. And number two, he can actually handle it. Your spouse can't handle those complaints. Your friends can't handle those complaints. But God of the universe can handle those complaints. David says to pour out your complaints to him. And when we do that, it's not showing that we're not grateful. Know what it's showing? It's showing that we believe that God can handle it, that we can trust God. Because there are times, if I'm being honest, there are times for me where I have complaints about my kids. And then I think, and I'm like, well, there's so many people that like struggle to have kids. And here I am complaining about my kids. I shouldn't complain about my kids, because if I complain about my kids, there's so many people that don't have it, so that's me not being grateful. I need to stop complaining about my kids. Or there's times where I complain about my spouse. And if you know my spouse, you know that I like definitely overshot my coverage in marrying her, right? I married up. You're probably still questioning why she still married me, right? But there's times where I have complaints. And there's some people that be like, I wish I was married. I wish I could find somebody like that, but yet I have complaints about it. There's times I have complaints about my job. I love my job. There's times I have complaints about it. And know what I start to do? I start to feel like guilty about it. Like I feel like I'm like a spoiled brat. Like God gave me all this stuff, but I'm still complaining about it. What do we do with that? We pour it out to God. Because here's what David knows. Here's what I'm trying to learn. Here's what we need to learn. To enter God's presence, you have to enter it exactly as you are. Not who you want to be. Not the person that doesn't complain a lot. If you have those complaints, you have to enter into his presence with those complaints, or you're not being yourself. You're being fake. If you have those complaints, do what David did and pour it out to God and say, God, I don't know why this is happening. God, I don't know why my kids are just doing this. My spouse is doing this. Pour out your complaints to God because he can handle it. The presence of God is not a place for you to bypass your emotions. The presence of God is a place for you to process your emotions. Go exactly as you are. You have a lot of complaints, take it to God. Pour it out to him. You can change your perspective even when you can't change your circumstance. And for some of us, the way we start is by taking those complaints to him. And say, God, I have these complaints. Help change my perspective. What can you do about these complaints? Because I believe that God will remind you of things. I believe that God will start to work on your heart. And when we're vulnerable and we're able to take those things that hurt us the most and pour it out to God, God will use those situations to grow us closer to him. He won't shun you. He will help change your perspective. You can change your perspective even when you can't change your circumstance. Can we pray? Dear God, I thank you for being the perfect Father for us. God who loves us so much that you sent your Son for us. God, I thank you for just that love that you pour out on us. Dear God, we're sorry for the times where we take it for granted. We all do it. Times where we complain when we shouldn't be complaining. God, thank you that even within our complaints, you invite us to come and to bring whatever baggage we have, bring whatever complaints that we have, and pour it out to you. And you don't shun us for that, but you just love us. God, I pray for the people in this room that you help them to take that step to be in your presence exactly as they are. Even if their prayer life is them yelling at you, it's entering your presence. God, I pray that you remind us of all the good things you've done in our lives, all the times you've showed up in our lives. There's a list of them for each one of us. Remind us of those times. Bring those things back to our memory when we feel like complaining, when our circumstances aren't what we want it to be. God, help us to have a heart of gratitude. So we know when we put you in the center, we have a heart of gratitude. God, I pray as we continue this series and we talk about some of the other things our mouth does, you convict us and you show us your grace. God, thank you for loving us no matter what. We are grateful for you. In your Son's name, amen. Amen, guys. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us on this Father's Day. We hope you have a great Father's Day. As you guys leave, take as many of those invite cards as you would like. If you want to invite any friends to church next week as we talk about criticizing, which is going to be fun, so make sure you take those invite cards. If you want to sign up for ownership class, you can go right outside to the foyer, and you can sign up on the iPad, or you can go to impactchurchmd.com/ownership. You can sign up there as well. And if it's your first time or your second time here, make sure you take your connection cards to your welcome tent, and you get a free gift, or we'll donate $2 on your behalf. Thank you guys so much for coming. We'll see you guys next week.